charter school operating in your district, and many of you do, and some of those charters may be operating and just getting to the end of the first 4 or 5 year cycle. Some of your charter schools may have been operating for 10 or 15 years, but there's been some changes since the time that those charters got started. And so as a result, you may need to ask a basic question when considering renewal to say, does that need that this charter was originated for, does it still exist? And if it doesn't exist, that may be a reason to say, well, maybe we don't need to renew it. Is there still the presence of an active governance council? And again, on the front end, when people are excited about getting a charter school going, there's a lot of people that are really actively involved. And governance council is one of those that meets very actively. The longer you operate, though, the more the possibility exists that governance council may begin to lose some of that enthusiasm. Some of those original members may leave the governance council. Some people coming on may not have quite the same vision. So you need to consider that. You need to consider how active is that governance council. Has there been a written contract? And frankly, if you go back to some of the older charter schools, there probably wasn't that written contract before, but that's a requirement now for renewing it. So you need to look at that and decide, are we meeting the regulations on that as part of a renewal decision? Obviously, a logical renewal decision is, are we meeting the academic performance benchmarks that we talked about through this charter school? And finally, does there still remain a good organizational structure? And looking at, are there any financial issues? And as a result, with an instrumentality, chances are the financial issues would be fairly minimal, unless it's a situation of competing resources, because as schools have seen declining enrollment, that may also affect the resources available to a charter school. So that gets to be a consideration in renewing a proposal. Some of the key renewal considerations that you need to look at is, have there been staffing changes since it was originated? In another segment of the presentation, we talked about some charter schools that are operating in the state. We had some videos on some, and those are available as resources. But those charter schools that have been around for a long time tend to have very stable staffing. The people that were there, that were committed to it from the origination of it, are still there. And what we found when we had our charter school that I was a part of, that charter school closed after about 15 years. And the reason for it was all of the original people that had been part of that charter school either retired or left the district. And that included not only the teachers, but also included the administrative staff that were initially involved with that. So you need to consider that, and you need to consider, has there been a lot of change in the governance council? Another thing you need to consider is the charter school still staying on mission? Or as it has moved along through the years, has that mission kind of morphed and moved into something else? Maybe the original reason is no longer there, so that's something to consider. If there happens to be some dips in academic performance that are of concern, that would be a reason for considering whether we want to renew or not. The organizational structure, once that is put together, there's probably not a lot of reason that there would be concern for change in that, because when I talk about the organizational structure, we're talking about how you enroll students in the charter, how you make sure that you're non-discriminatory, how you make sure you've got policies and procedures in place for disciplining students, for setting a proper culture. So the organizational structure is probably not going to be a key factor in a decision to renew or non-renew. Financial considerations may or may not be a major consideration, though they may play into it. And finally, one of the bigger considerations is, does that need still exist? And if it doesn't, then you should probably look at the idea that, we probably don't want to renew this. And finally, you reach that difficult decision of saying, you know what, we're going to decide as a board to close a charter school. And closing a charter school is, let's think back to when we closed the one-room school houses years and years ago. It's never a popular decision. The people that have got kids enrolled in the charter tend to really like it. And they may not understand everything that's going on in the background. They just know that their kids are there and they really like being there. But if that staff commitment is no longer there, or if the staff that is now working in your charter school doesn't really understand fully how it got started, that may be a reason for saying, it's probably time to close this up. If you've got a charter school that's been around for a long time, they may just be saying, we're not willing to meet those new guidelines. We don't have the energy. We just don't want to do it. So that may be a reason why a board may say, we're going to close it. Of course, academic performance would be a logical reason. I mean, if your academic performance is really sliding in a charter school, that would be a reason for shutting it down. If you are losing parent or community support, generally a very effective, a well-operating charter school tends to have not only good parent and community support, but it tends to have a waiting list every year of people waiting to enroll their students. If you get to the point where there's no longer a waiting list, and as a matter of fact, you're having trouble filling the seats in your charter, that may be a reason to say, it's probably time to discontinue this charter. And in some cases, it simply may come to it's no longer financially feasible. And the reason for that is that sometimes when a charter school gets started, it's advantageous to have smaller class sizes. And there were opportunities. There may have been better opportunities for smaller class sizes 10 or 15 years ago, but now as you're strapped for funds to operate all of your schools, you may not be able to maintain those small class sizes, and with the larger class sizes you need to move to, that charter may no longer be financially, or it may no longer be educationally feasible. So you've got to give that consideration also. So those are just a few things that you might want to consider as you reach that difficult juncture where you've got to decide, should we renew this charter, or is it time to maybe close it down?